Welcome to WizeUp. I'm Paul Arthur. Today we want to talk about woke judges, sure lots of them it seems in Canada, and judicial activism, and it just seems to be getting out of hand, and also the assault on free speech. That's ongoing in Canada, never seems to end. So before we dive into that, a quick reminder to hit subscribe if you're watching online. Our guest joining us from Manitoba, Brian Giesbrecht. He's a retired provincial court judge, and he's written numerous media articles recently on these very issues as well. So Brian, thanks for making time for us today.
Oh, nice to be here.
You bet. Lots to talk about. And why don't we start with Dr. Frances Widdowson, of course, former Mount Royal University professor. She got fired there. She's been in the news, of course, over the last number of years for being a free speech and academic freedom advocate, as well as her position, which challenges the claims that 215 Indian residential school students were found, unmarked graves and so forth near Kamloops, BC. So she also, of course, engages in conversation and debates with university students across the country, and typically gets crowds of angry mobs that show up when she does this, and the results are pretty chaotic. Now, she just got arrested at the University of Lethbridge. So do you want to just comment, I guess, on your view of what just happened at the University in Lethbridge here?
Yeah, well, it's in one word would be appalling that a university would stop a university professor from having a discussion with students about a controversial subject, because that's exactly what universities are for. And I'm still shaking my head at what's happened here. Frances Widdowson is a very brave professor. Now, she has a long history dealing with controversial Indigenous issues. She wrote a book in, I think it was 2009, called Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry. Another term for that used by most Indigenous people is the Indian industry. And it talks about how billions of dollars are spent supporting an industry that ends up hurting Indigenous people, at least the majority of Indigenous people. It's a fascinating book. I think people should consider reading it. But so she has a long history of speaking out on these topics, and lately she has been. She's part of our group. We have a group of researchers and academics, etc., that have been dealing with this issue. We came together after this claim about 215 children, the remains of 215 children being found. They had been secretly buried at the school. They had been somehow killed wrongfully and then secretly buried with the forced help of 6-year-olds. And we have all, in our group, we've all done a certain amount of writing and researching residential schools, and we knew that this claim was completely false. And it was false right from the start. It should be pointed out there were no remains found. All they found were soil disturbances, and the most likely reason for those disturbances is prior excavations on that property. But there are no bodies there, and the claims that followed about thousands of similar cases are just nonsense. They're based on nothing, and unfortunately, the government just made this so much worse by offering hundreds of millions of dollars to any Indigenous community that wanted to make this claim. Well, these are poor Indigenous communities, and who wouldn't jump at the chance to make a claim that got you, millions of dollars? In any event, I won't go through all of the details in this. Anybody can find material that we've written. There's, I think, Grave Error and Dead Wrong are books that are known to people by now. Frances Widdowson is a contributor in both books. But Frances has made a point of going to universities and trying to speak to students and challenge them on this topic, because the belief at these universities is that these stories are entirely true, and that atrocities were committed at residential schools and that priests killed children. This never happened. And Francis goes and tries to engage people in conversation about this. And we've seen the results. We've seen the university actually bar her from their premises and then call the police. And they must have a very weak police chief in Lethbridge, because he actually agreed to have his police officers go and physically arrest her and throw her in jail. A police chief should do no such thing. He should have realized this was not something he should be doing. The university should have realized that this is not something that should happen, and they should have made sure that she was provided with safety and allowed her to speak to students. And I have to say, our leaders, so far, I haven't heard them, I might be wrong, but I haven't heard them denounce what has happened to the professor. I think that we should be hearing from Premier Smith, we should be hearing from Mr. Poilievre, and above all, we should be hearing from Mark Carney. They should be denouncing what's happened to this assault on free speech. So those are my comments. I've read a few articles.
Yeah, I mean, we should point out to our viewers, in case they're not up to speed on this one. So she was arrested, for Dr. Widdowson. She was simply, the cafeteria was actually almost empty at the university cafeteria, having a coffee with a student and discussing, presumably, some of these issues around the Indian residential schools and so forth. You shouldn't get arrested for having a conversation, right? Now, in defense of the university, I suppose, they say that they had issued a do not trespass order to Dr. Widdowson. She says she never ever did receive that. So we have, he said, she said. So I'm not sure what the case is there legally. Now, if there was no, do not trespass order issued, then I don't see how legally they can go and arrest her. I mean, you're a judge. You would know, I guess, in that case. But if there was actually a do not trespass order issued, would they be within their rights then to arrest her?
Well, the point is there should have been no, whether or not there was one should be irrelevant. They should not have issued such a thing. The universities should be promoting free discussion, and they should be not singling out certain topics. If they have somebody who is dangerous and who is advocating that let's kill certain people or something, then of course you don't want those people on campus. But here we have a professor who has an opinion on a controversial subject, and she wants to discuss matters with students. She has every right to do it, and the students there have every right to hear opposing views. This idea that a university is going to take the students and protect them, put a wall around the students so that they can't be exposed to ideas that the university officials might not like. That's not what a university is for. A university is supposed to be challenging students and is supposed to be exposing students to all different points of view.
For sure. That's what it used to be like. So now you're suggesting that the Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre as well, and Premier Daniel Smith should be responding to this. How do you think they should respond? Again, and perhaps in the case of provincial funding for universities, should the Smith government say, look, you allow this debate to happen or we're going to withhold funding?
I think that is one of the things that they should consider. I think that in Professor Widdowson's view, she's been to many universities now before. She says the University of Lethbridge is one of the worst in terms of ideological rigidity, whatever you call it. In other words, making certain subjects taboo, and this is one of them. Unmarked graves, residential schools have somehow become a taboo subject, and to have taboo subjects at universities is just very bad. So I think all of these leaders should be speaking out in favor of free speech and denouncing what happened to Francis Widdowson. Yes, I do.
I noticed that there's a philanthropist from Calgary, an entrepreneur who's offered to donate $100,000 to the University of Lethbridge if they offer an official apology to Dr. Widdowson. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's a unique offer to be there. I've also noticed that there's some alumni who have said, we're not going to be donating to the university anymore. And maybe that's, one of the consequences that should happen is if we don't allow free academic debate, then why should we be, donating to a university like the U of L or any other university for that matter if they don't allow free speech?
Well, I think so, and we've seen south of the border. We've seen some of this playing out with universities adopting rigid positions and not allowing certain viewpoints, and that's exactly what has happened. In some cases, funds have been withheld from these universities until they guarantee that they can offer at least the minimum in terms of free speech and etc. So yes, no, I think that this is an important incident, and I know that the mainstream news isn't even going to cover it. CBC is just going to ignore it. That's what's going to happen. So I suspect what's going to happen, and we'll see if I'm right or not. But I think that the American conservative media is going to pick this up. They all are already, unfortunately, having a huge laugh about what is happening in Canada, and this will just be another egregious example of things gone wrong up north.
And maybe that's the way to get some coverage, because, of course, many Canadians do watch American television, so forth, so we'll see what happens with that. And I can understand why the University of Lethbridge doesn't want chaotic events on their campus. That's self-explanatory. But I think it's a self-inflicted wound, frankly. You've been doing this for decades. The professors have been teaching. You've been hiring professors who teach this to their students, that it's okay. This is how we handle controversy. We simply, somebody disagrees with you, well, you shout them down, you name call, refuse to debate anyone who disagrees with you. That seems to be what's being taught at so many universities today. And so that's what you end up with somebody who comes on campus and says, well, I disagree with this. That's how we respond. It's silliness. It doesn't prepare people for the real world. Whatever happened to, diversity, somebody who has a differing opinion than you, that's officially, right? All the universities are saying we're diverse places, right? Well, we're diverse as long as you, agree with me, and we will tolerate you as long as you agree with me. There's no need for tolerance if you all think the same way, frankly, right?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Inclusion, well, we include you if you agree with me. It's just, what am I missing here, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember as a university student listening to people argue and debate. And I remember René Lévesque and people like that. And we were fascinated. The students found it when you had somebody with a completely different view, and they were not shouted down. They were listened to, and whether or not you agreed with these people or not, that's not the point. You were getting new information. You were being challenged, and that's what universities are for. They're not to protect children from viewpoints that might cause them some upset or something like that. Why go to university if you're not interested in being challenged?
Yeah. Truth matters, facts matter. If we hurt somebody's feelings, I don't think it's, matters that much. We need to be adults here, right? So I want to talk a little about woke judges as well. You've written some articles on this. Shouldn't Canada be a nation where it's a safe place, you can express your opinions publicly without worrying about getting hauled before a Human Rights Tribunal someplace, right? And that's what's being happened far too often. There's a pile of human rights complaints, for example, recently filed against multiple individuals and some organizations as well by transgender activist Jessica Simpson. So, where are we going with this? Why can't a Canadian citizen simply voice their opinion that a biological male can't become a woman, even if they have surgery or hormone treatments or whatever. That's their opinion. It's different than the opinion of this individual. Why can't we voice that without being worried about getting sued?
Well, yeah, I remember Jordan Peterson telling us about this more than 10 years ago and refusing to go along with this idea that you have to call a he, she, a she, or a she, a he, etc.
Yeah.
And just telling us, no, you can't compel me, you can't make a command and tell me to deny reality. And people should be able to say what they want. And if there is a so-called trans man, and I don't want to call him a woman, I don't have to. I don't have to deny science, etc. People should be able to speak freely, and this is basically a free speech thing. But that is another one where. Another subject where somehow we've just gone off the rails. And so I think those cases, the one you referred to, Jessica Simpson or Jonathan Simpson, I think his name is Jonathan Yaniv.
Yeah, I believe that was his former name, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, and he's a very unusual man, but I mean, it's the case of he's a Jewish man, and he says he's a Métis woman. Okay, now, so I think I am allowed, according to his rules, anyways, and some human rights rules, to say, "Oh no, you're not a Métis woman. But I have to say you're a Jewish woman." I can't say. It's really quite crazy, and the fact that we have allowed ourselves to sort of submit to this type of coercion, I think is very wrong. So I think people are best off just going with reality. And if a transgender person, a man has given himself a female name, and that person wants to be called that name, and you choose to do so, you can. But you don't have to. It's not. There should be no legal compulsion.
Well, that's what it should be, right? But now it is compelled speech, if I understand correctly, because I'm seeing human rights tribunals applying the law, apparently, and suing people like Barry Neufeld, former school board trustee in BC. Because he's speaking out against this, and which is, I guess, hurting some people's feelings. But now he's owing $750,000. How can that happen, on Canadian soil? But it's happening. So there must be some sort of a law that actually allows these human rights panelists to do this.
Well, I think the Barry Neufeld case, just like the Francis Widdowson case, these are egregious assaults to common sense, among other things. And you have to feel very badly for Mr. Neufeld, who had strong opinions about LGBT issues. Well, so what? People have strong opinions, and you can voice your opinions, and actually have a tribunal order him to pay $750,000. This man lives in a trailer. He doesn't have $750,000.
Yeah, it's like getting blood from a stone, right? It's not going to happen.
Ruined. They knew exactly what they were doing. So there are no words to describe how awful that situation is. And there have been many who say, well, look, the time for these human rights tribunals is past. We should simply abolish them, and I'm in that group. They once had a purpose during the civil rights time, etc. There was something there, but now they've gone way past what they should be doing, and the people who are being appointed to those things are not representative of society.
Yeah, I don't think that's the average person watching is says that just doesn't make sense. That's not the real world that we live in. Okay, if I can't tell a normal person that, hey, I'm a black woman from Antarctica. That's who I am. I self-identify as such, and you need to address me as such, and treat me legally as such. We can all see that's not the case. It's self-evident, right? So we need to get back to common sense that way. So let me ask you this, I guess. How do we appoint our judges in Canada? Who appoints them? And does that need to change?
Well, judges are appointed at the provincial and federal level, and there's a difference there. Each province appoints their judges differently. I think the controversy has been more at the federal level, and you've seen some of the premiers, for instance, wanting to have more control over who is appointed. And I think that's going to intensify. That debate is going to intensify. And I'm not meaning to insult anybody who's being appointed, because I'm sure they're all very good people. But at one time in Canada, we had a pretty good balance of, say, small c conservative judges and progressive judges, or small l liberal, whatever you want to call them. And at the Supreme Court level, we even had times when there were more conservative judges than liberal judges. But overall, we had a pretty good mix. And during the times even of, say, Chrétien, who was a liberal, and Harper or Mulroney, who were conservatives, they understood the importance of keeping that balance. So every prime minister is going to want to appoint people who are a little closer to their own viewpoint. But there's a real danger in just having a bench that's completely slanted. So what I'm saying is under the Trudeau period, only progressives, not only progressives, but just about every judge appointed was a progressive. And we've got a bench that's very heavily weighted now towards the progressive side. So in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan, where you have more small c conservative people in the population than progressives, this is this is becoming more and more apparent, where something that's decided in a court is going to be decided according to the progressive view, even though most of the citizens are on the conservative side. And that parental right thing, I use that as an example in an article, because I think it's just the perfect example where a small c conservative party would. A small c conservative person would say, well, of course a parent has a right to know if their child is starting to show trans wishes at school. If their boy is wanting to be called Jocelyn or something like that, of course they should be notified right away. But the progressive view is the exact opposite. No, it should be up to the teachers and the school authorities and that sort of thing to determine. And if the child says, don't tell my parents, they don't. So, I mean, this is a very clear split between the way a conservative person sees an issue and the way a progressive person sees it. And we have this case now that's heading towards the Supreme Court where exactly this happens, where the province, Saskatchewan, has parental rights legislation, and a progressive judge has struck it down. So that's a very clear-cut case. So I am saying that we have to get back to a better balance in this country.
So how do we get there from here? How do we get a better balance? Again, if it's appointed by the Prime Minister, essentially, I guess if you want to get more conservative-leaning judges, you need to have a conservative prime minister, and it doesn't look like that's happening anytime soon. Is that the only way it can get done?
Well, I'm hoping that Mr. Carney is going to have a more a more mature understanding about the importance of having a balance than did Trudeau. And instead of just appointing progressives, he's going to realize that there has to be a better balance, and he's going to see to it that conservative judges are also appointed. Now, that's just a hope. I have no idea if it's going to happen or not. And this is obviously a problem that's not easily solved. But I just point to it as a very real problem. It's not something we can ignore.
Absolutely. Any advice, I guess, or thoughts for our viewers as to what they could possibly do to help turn the tide on free speech as well as our woke judiciary?
Well, I think people have to be active citizens. I think the only way of dealing with these issues is to respectfully make your point. And it's not by, shouting or violence or anything like that. It's just by respectful discussion and debate. That's what we have to get back to in this country, not the idea that if you express a certain point of view, you are an evil person if it doesn't agree with your own. But we have to encourage discussion, and so I think that is that's the only possible way out of this.
Yeah, I tend to agree. We've got to step up to the plate and have the courage, the chutzpah, to actually speak our mind, again, respectfully, and also to listen to the other side, even if we disagree. And if we can get to that point where we're actually talking instead of yelling, pushing and shoving, then hopefully we can start to turn the tide on that. I'm out of time here, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us here today.
Okay, very welcome. Nice talking to you.
You bet. Brian Giesbrecht, former Manitoba provincial court judge. Thank you for watching. Again, if you want to watch past episodes, just go to WizeUp.ca.